Imagine standing in your childhood bedroom, staring at a text message that reads, "We need to talk about Grandma's cottage. It's only fair we split it 50-50. Fair." That word kept echoing in my head as I looked around at the walls I'd repainted 3 times, the leaky roof I'd fixed last winter, the garden I'd spent 5 summers bringing back to life, the cottage my grandmother left to me, the one I'd moved into to care for her during her final 2 years while my cousin was posting beach vacation photos on Instagram. What she didn't know was that I had documentation, real proof of every lie she'd told, every promise she'd broken. And soon, at what was supposed to be her destination wedding, that proof would be projected on a screen in front of everyone who mattered to her. If you've ever poured your heart into caring for someone only to watch a relative swoop in demanding their fair share, you already know the hollow ache behind every word I'm about to share. Hit that like button if you've ever been treated like a walking inheritance instead of a human being, because this story is about the moment I finally stopped being the family doormat. My name is Sophie. I'm 32, and I've always been what people call the responsible one. The type who brings extra supplies to family gatherings, who remembers everyone's birthdays, who shows up when called. My cousin Amber was the opposite. 4 years younger than me, she'd perfected the art of being just charming enough that people excused her selfishness as free-spirited. When we were kids, I was the one teaching her to ride a bike while our parents worked. When she forgot her lunch money, I shared mine. When she needed a ride home from parties in high school, I was the one picking her up at 2 a.m., no questions asked. That pattern never really changed. Grandma Helen's cottage sat on Lake Muskoka, a 2-hour drive north of Toronto. It wasn't fancy, just a modest 2-bedroom with knotty pine walls and a stone fireplace that smoked if you didn't open the flue just right. But it had a dock that stretched into water so clear you could see the rocks below, and a screened porch where Grandma used to sit shelling peas while hummingbirds buzzed around her feeder. She bought it in 1967, with money she'd saved from working as a telephone operator, back when cottage country was still affordable. It was her pride and joy, the place where our whole family gathered every summer for 4 decades. When Grandma started showing signs of dementia 5 years ago, I was the one who noticed. Little things at first. She'd forget she'd already made coffee. She'd ask the same question 3 times in one conversation. Then bigger things. She left the stove on overnight. She got lost driving to the grocery store she'd been going to for 30 years. The family had a meeting, one of those uncomfortable gatherings where everyone looks at their phones and waits for someone else to volunteer. Amber was 27 then, working on her influencer career, which seemed to consist mainly of taking photos of overpriced brunches and accepting free products from companies desperate for exposure. "I'd love to help," Amber said during that meeting, "but my apartment doesn't have space and I'm traveling so much for collaborations." She said it apologetically, with those wide hazel eyes that had gotten her out of trouble since childhood. Everyone nodded sympathetically. Meanwhile, I was living in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment in the city, working as a medical administrator at a pediatric clinic. I had space issues too. I had a demanding job too. But I also had something Amber didn't seem to possess. A sense of obligation to the woman who'd raised us, while our parents worked doubles to keep us fed. So I made a choice. I gave up my apartment, left my job, and moved into the cottage. Grandma needed round-the-clock care, and nursing homes in cottage country were either too expensive or had waiting lists measured in years. For the next 2 years, my life became a routine of medications, doctor appointments, and trying to keep Grandma safe as her mind slowly slipped away. I learned to hide the car keys after she tried to drive to a store that had closed in 1989. I installed locks on the outside of doors after she wandered onto the dock at 3 a.m. I held her hand through the terrifying moments when she didn't recognize me and thought I was an intruder. Amber visited 4 times in 2 years. Each visit was carefully documented on social media, with captions like "Precious time with Grandma at the lake house" and "Family is everything." She'd stay for an afternoon, take dozens of photos, then drive back to the city complaining about the lack of cell service. She never offered to stay overnight. Never offered to help with medications or bathing, or the 100 small indignities that come with advanced dementia. She certainly never offered to help financially, even though Grandma's savings were being drained by medical expenses. The cottage itself started falling apart. The roof leaked during that first winter, and I spent 3 days in the attic laying down new shingles because I couldn't afford a contractor. The septic system failed the next spring, costing $8,000 that I had to put on credit cards. The dock needed new boards, the furnace needed replacing, and the garden Grandma had lovingly tended for decades was being overtaken by weeds. I did what I could. I watched YouTube videos about home repair. I learned to patch drywall and unclog pipes and troubleshoot electrical problems. Every repair felt like keeping a piece of Grandma alive. When Grandma passed away last October, it was quiet. She slipped away in her sleep on a cool autumn morning, the lake outside her window smooth as glass. I was sitting in the chair beside her bed where I'd spent so many nights, holding her hand. I'd called Amber the day before, told her the hospice nurse said it was time. "I'm in the middle of a brand partnership deal," Amber said, "but I'll try to make it up this weekend." She didn't make it. She showed up 3 days after Grandma died, wearing all black and crying dramatically, making sure someone captured her grief on camera for her Instagram stories. The funeral was small, 20 people who'd known Grandma from church or the community center. Amber stood beside me at the graveside, gripping my arm like we were united in our loss, even though she'd barely been present for any of it. The will reading happened a week later in the office of Grandma's lawyer, a kind older man named Gerald who'd known our family for years. Grandma had updated her will 8 months before she died, during one of her lucid periods. She left the cottage to me, not half to each of us, not a percentage split, just to me, with a note in her handwriting attached. Sophie gave up 2 years of her life to care for me. She fixed every leak, painted every room, and held my hand through the darkness. This is my way of saying thank you. Amber will understand. Except Amber didn't understand. Or more accurately, she didn't want to understand. She sat in that lawyer's office with her mouth hanging open, then turned to Gerald and said, "This can't be right. Grandma wouldn't do this. We're both her granddaughters." Sophie must have influenced her when she was sick. Her voice got louder, more shrill. "This is elder abuse. I'm going to contest this." Gerald remained calm, his voice steady. "Your grandmother was of sound mind when she updated this will. I personally verified her mental capacity. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she explained her reasoning to me in detail." He slid a second document across his desk. It was a letter Grandma had written, notarized and dated. In it, she listed every repair I'd made, every night I'd stayed awake, every doctor's appointment I'd attended. She also noted Amber's 4 visits in 2 years. The numbers didn't lie. Amber stormed out of that office, heels clicking furiously against the hardwood floor. She didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. Then, just when I thought maybe she'd accepted reality, my phone buzzed with that text message. "We need to talk about Grandma's cottage. It's only fair we split it 50-50. I stared at those words for a long time, sitting on the porch where Grandma used to shell peas. The lake was gray under November clouds, the water choppy and cold. I texted back, "The will is clear. Grandma left it to me." 3 dots appeared immediately, disappearing and reappearing for what felt like forever, before her response came through. "That's so selfish. I'm family too. I deserve something. Besides, I'm getting married next summer, and Bryce and I need money for the wedding. The least you could do is sell the cottage and give me my half." Bryce was her fiancé, a personal trainer she'd been dating for 8 months. I'd met him once, during one of her brief cottage visits. He'd spent the entire time on his phone and complained about the lack of a good gym nearby. Over the next 2 months, Amber's campaign intensified. She told family members I'd manipulated Grandma. She posted vague Instagram stories about family betrayal and greedy relatives. She sent me long text messages detailing her wedding plans and how a destination wedding in Tulum was what she deserved after everything she'd been through. The irony of that phrase, "everything she'd been through," wasn't lost on me. What exactly had she been through? A grandmother who loved her? A cousin who'd always covered for her? I tried to be reasonable. I offered her $15,000, which was about all I could spare without selling the cottage. I was still paying down credit card debt from the septic system and furnace repairs. "15,000? She replied. "The cottage is worth at least $600,000. That means my half is $300,000. Stop being cheap and do the right thing. $300,000. For someone who'd visited 4 times in 2 years. For someone who'd never unclogged a single drain or patched a single leak." The audacity was breathtaking. Then came the phone call. It was a Tuesday evening in January, and I was sitting by the fire trying to read when Amber's name lit up my screen. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Sophie," she began, and her voice was different, softer, almost vulnerable. "I'm really sorry about how I've been acting. Wedding stress, you know? I've been awful to you, and you didn't deserve that. You were amazing with Grandma. I should have said that sooner." I felt something loosen in my chest, some tight knot I'd been carrying for months. "Thank you," I managed. "That means a lot. Which is why I want to make it up to you," she continued. "Bryce and I are having an engagement party at this gorgeous venue in Toronto next month. I want you there. I want you to be part of this happy moment. Can we start over? I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that the cousin I'd grown up with, the one I'd taught to ride a bike, still existed underneath all the entitlement and social media performance. I'd love that, I said. When is it? She gave me the date, and we talked for another 20 minutes about normal things. Her dress shopping, the florist she'd hired, the photographer who was giving her a deal because of her follower count. It felt like old times, before money and inheritance had poisoned everything between us. My best friend Rachel didn't trust it. She wants something, Rachel said when I told her about the call. Amber doesn't do anything without an angle. But I ignored her warning. Hope is a stubborn thing. The engagement party was at a trendy event space in the Distillery District, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs. When I arrived, Amber was at the door, looking stunning in a champagne-colored dress. She hugged me tight, holding on just a second longer than necessary. "I'm so glad you came," she whispered. The room was packed with people I didn't recognize, Amber's influencer friends and Bryce's gym buddies, and then I noticed them. 3 people in business suits sitting at a corner table. No champagne flutes, no plates of appetizers, just leather portfolios and expensive watches. They kept glancing toward Amber, then toward me. A cold feeling washed over me. We sat down at a table near the front. Amber was all smiles and chatter, complimenting my outfit and asking about my drive into the city. But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes kept flicking to those 3 people in suits. Then, as the appetizers were being served, Bryce stood up and cleared his throat. "Before we get too deep into celebrating," he announced, "Amber and I want to address something important. Family matters." He gestured, and the 3 people in suits approached our table. "Sophie, these are our lawyers. We've been working on some estate planning, and we realized there might have been some confusion about Grandma Helen's will." One of the lawyers, a severe-looking woman in her 50s, slid a document across the table to me. "We've prepared a trust restructuring that would divide your grandmother's assets more equitably between both granddaughters. It acknowledges your caregiving contribution with a 60-40 split instead of the current arrangement." I opened the folder with hands that had started to shake. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. They wanted me to sign over 40% of the cottage's value, roughly $240,000, to Amber. There were also clauses about selling the property, with Amber and Bryce having veto power over potential buyers. "This isn't what you said," I whispered, looking at Amber. "You said this was an engagement party." Her expression shifted, the warmth draining away like someone had flipped a switch. "It is an engagement party. But it's also a chance for you to do the right thing. Grandma wouldn't want us fighting. She'd want both her granddaughters to be happy. By signing away what she left specifically to me?" My voice was getting louder. People at nearby tables were starting to stare. "This is emotional blackmail." That's when Rachel stood up from where she'd been sitting 2 tables away. I hadn't even realized she'd come to the party. She walked over, her phone in her hand, and set it on the table between us. The screen showed a recording app, the red button glowing. "How long has that been recording?" Bryce demanded, his face flushing red. "Long enough," Rachel said calmly. "Long enough to capture Amber inviting Sophie under false pretenses. Long enough to record you ambushing her with lawyers at what she thought was a family celebration. Long enough to document this attempted coercion." The lead lawyer's expression changed immediately. "You can't record without consent in Ontario," she said sharply. "Actually," Rachel replied, "I can. Sophie consented to me recording this event to protect her from exactly this kind of manipulation. One-party consent, look it up." I watched Amber's face cycle through emotions. Shock, then anger, then something that looked almost like fear. The mask she'd been wearing, the sweet apologetic cousin act, completely shattered. "You set me up," she hissed. "No," I said, standing up. "You set yourself up. I came here thinking you wanted to reconcile. Instead, you tried to intimidate me with lawyers into signing away what Grandma wanted me to have." The 3 lawyers were already gathering their portfolios, clearly wanting to distance themselves from this disaster. Several of Amber's influencer friends had their phones out, no doubt recording this confrontation for their own content. The irony wasn't lost on me. I left that party with my head up, Rachel beside me. Behind us, I could hear Amber's voice rising, trying to control the narrative, trying to explain to her guests that I was the unreasonable one. But the damage was done. Within hours, the story was spreading through our extended family. Rachel had sent the recording to my aunt and uncle, Amber's parents, who'd been putting pressure on me to be fair to their daughter. When they heard their daughter plotting with lawyers to manipulate me, their tune changed completely. But I wasn't done. Because Amber wasn't done. 2 weeks after the engagement party disaster, I received a wedding invitation. Not just any invitation, but an elaborate affair. Amber and Bryce were getting married in Tulum, Mexico, at an all-inclusive resort. The invitation listed their registry, which included a honeymoon fund requesting contributions of $500 or more to help us start our life together. The wedding was in 6 weeks. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let Amber have her destination wedding and move on with my life. But another part of me, the part that had spent 2 years changing adult diapers and watching a brilliant woman forget her own name, couldn't let it go. Not when Amber was still telling people I'd stolen her inheritance. Not when she was still positioning herself as the victim. So I RSVP'd yes. I booked my flight and a room at the resort. And I made copies of everything. Every receipt from Cottage repairs. Every credit card statement showing what I'd spent keeping Grandma's home standing. Every text message where Amber had declined to visit or help. Every Instagram post where she'd been on vacation while I was installing a new furnace. I also had the recording from the engagement party, and I had Grandma's letter explaining her decision. I organized it all into a simple presentation. Nothing fancy, just facts and dates and numbers. Rachel thought I was crazy. Just let it go, she said as she helped me pack. Let her have her wedding. Living well is the best revenge. But this wasn't about revenge. Or maybe it was, just a little. Mostly it was about the truth. About making sure that everyone who'd been listening to Amber's version of events heard the reality. The resort in Tulum was exactly what I expected. Instagram perfect. White sand beaches, turquoise water, palm trees swaying in the breeze. The wedding was scheduled for sunset on the beach, followed by a reception in a pavilion decorated with thousands of white flowers and string lights. It was the kind of wedding that cost more than most people's annual salary. I wondered how much of it Bryce's parents were paying for, and how much was funded by the wedding fund contributions I'd seen on their registry. The ceremony itself was beautiful, I had to admit. Amber looked stunning in a flowing white dress, her hair in perfect beachy waves. Bryce looked tanned and fit in his white linen suit. They exchanged vows as the sun melted into the ocean, painting everything gold and pink. I sat in the back row, next to distant cousins who'd made the trip, and I felt nothing but a hollow sadness. This could have been a moment of genuine family joy. Instead, it was built on lies and entitlement. The reception started with cocktails and appetizers. There was a live band, a photo booth, and servers circulating with champagne and ceviche. Amber and Bryce made their entrance to applause and cheers, dancing their way into the pavilion like they were the stars of their own reality show. Then came the speeches. Bryce's best man told embarrassing stories about their gym pranks. Amber's maid of honor gushed about their friendship, and how Amber always stayed true to herself. Then Amber's father, my uncle, stood up to give the father of the bride speech. He talked about watching Amber grow up, about her creativity and spirit, about how proud Grandma Helen would have been to see this day. That phrase, Grandma Helen would have been proud, echoed in my mind. Would she? Would she have been proud of a granddaughter who visited 4 times in 2 years, who demanded money she hadn't earned, who tried to manipulate her way into an inheritance? I stood up. I didn't plan to, but my body moved before my brain could stop it. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet pavilion, "but I need to say something." Amber's smile froze on her face. Bryce looked confused, then annoyed. My uncle sat down slowly, his expression uncertain. I walked to the front where the DJ had his laptop set up. "May I?" I asked him. He looked at Amber, who was now shaking her head frantically, but he shrugged and stepped aside. I plugged in my USB drive. The screen behind the head table, which had been showing a slideshow of Amber and Bryce's engagement photos, went dark for a moment. Then my presentation appeared. "I want to tell you all about Grandma Helen's cottage," I began, "and about the last 2 years of her life." The first slide showed the cottage, that beautiful view of Lake Muskoka, the dock, the screened porch. This is what Grandma Helen loved more than anything. She bought this place in 1967, with money she'd saved working as a telephone operator. It was her sanctuary. When she got sick, someone needed to take care of her and this place. The next slides showed receipts. The roof repair, $4,200. The septic system, $8,000. The furnace, $6,500. The dock boards, $1,800. Electric panel upgrade, $3,200. On and on, A litany of expenses totaling over $45,000 that I'd paid out of pocket while living in the cottage and caring for Grandma. These are the repairs I made over 2 years, I explained. These are the costs of keeping Grandma's home standing while also being her full-time caregiver. The next slide showed a calendar, marked with doctor's appointments, 127 of them over 24 months. These are the medical appointments I took her to: neurologist, cardiologist, primary care, hospice consultations. Every single one. Then came the social media posts. Screenshots of Amber's Instagram from those 2 years. Amber in Miami. Amber at a music festival. Amber at a spa retreat. Amber having brunch at expensive restaurants. Each post dated. Each one occurring during a time when I'd been at the cottage changing Grandma's medications or cleaning up after her accidents. These are the 4 visits Amber made in 2 years, I said, showing the handful of posts from the cottage, all carefully staged with Grandma looking confused in the background. Each visit lasted about 3 hours. Long enough for photos, but not long enough to help with any actual care. The pavilion was completely silent. 150 wedding guests staring at the screen, then at me, then at Amber, whose face had gone pale under her professional makeup. I showed Grandma's letter next, the one she'd written explaining why she left the cottage to me. I read it aloud, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. Sophie gave up 2 years of her life to care for me. She fixed every leak, painted every room, and held my hand through the darkness. Then I played the audio from the engagement party. Amber's voice, sharp and demanding. The cottage is worth at least $600,000. That means my half is $300,000. Bryce's voice. We need to address this before it goes any further. The lawyer's voice explaining the trust restructuring that would force me to give up 40% of what Grandma had left me. When the recording ended, I unplugged my drive and turned to face Amber. I came here today because I thought maybe, somehow, we could still be family. But you've spent months telling everyone I manipulated Grandma, that I stole what was rightfully yours. So here's the truth. Every receipt, every text message, every Instagram post. Let everyone decide who really deserves what. I walked out of that pavilion and didn't look back. Behind me, I could hear the eruption of voices. Shocked gasps, angry accusations, the sound of Amber crying. I walked across the resort grounds, past the perfect pools and manicured gardens, down to the beach where the ceremony had taken place just hours earlier. The sun was fully set now, the sky dark except for stars. I sat in the sand and let myself breathe. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. My aunt, Amber's mother, calling to apologize. My uncle, saying he had no idea about the lawyers at the engagement party. Extended family members I hadn't heard from in months, suddenly wanting to tell me they'd always believed my side of the story. Rachel called. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm okay," I said, and I meant it. I'm actually okay. The fallout was swift and comprehensive. Several of Amber's influencer friends posted about the incident, some defending her, but many expressing shock at the receipts I'd presented. The recording of the engagement party lawyer ambush went semi-viral in online communities about family drama and toxic relatives. Amber's carefully curated image as a free-spirited, authentic person crumbled under the weight of documented evidence. Bryce's parents, who'd been contributing significantly to the wedding costs, were mortified. They'd believed Amber's version of events, that she was the victim of an unfair will and a greedy cousin. Learning the truth at their son's wedding, in front of all their friends and family, was humiliating. They cut off further financial support for the couple. The marriage itself didn't last long. Without the promised inheritance money and facing the social consequences of the truth coming out, Bryce's interest in Amber waned quickly. They separated 4 months after the wedding, before their first anniversary. Turns out he'd been more invested in the lifestyle Amber promised than in Amber herself. As for me, I stayed at the cottage. I finished the repairs Grandma and I had started together. I repainted the bedroom where she'd spent her final months, turning it into a guest room with windows that overlooked the lake. I restored her garden, planting the same varieties of tomatoes and zucchini she'd always loved. I kept her hummingbird feeders full. On warm summer evenings, I sit on that screened porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun set over Lake Muskoka, and I talk to her. I tell her about my day, about the repairs I'm working on, about the family drama that finally ended. Sometimes I swear I can smell her perfume, that floral scent she wore for 40 years. Sometimes I hear her laugh in the sound of the wind through the pine trees. The cottage isn't worth $600,000 anymore. The market shifted, and lakefront property values dropped. But even if someone offered me double that amount, I wouldn't sell. Because this place isn't about money. It never was. It's about the 2 years I spent caring for a woman who helped raise me. It's about the memories in every room, the pencil marks on the doorframe where she measured my height every summer, the stone she painted with my name when I was 7. It's about choosing to show up, even when it's hard, even when no one's watching, even when there's no reward except knowing you did the right thing. Looking back, I realize I spent so many years trying to be the good cousin, the responsible one, the person who fixed everyone else's problems. I let Amber take advantage of my nature because calling her out felt mean. But there comes a point when protecting yourself isn't selfish, when setting boundaries isn't cruel, when demanding that people earn what they receive isn't greedy. Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest, because they know exactly where our soft spots are and they press on them without mercy. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the one who showed up while others posted photos pretending they cared, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment and tell me about the moment you finally stood up to a toxic family member. What was your breaking point? How did you find the courage? Because here's what I learned. Family isn't just about shared DNA. It's about who shows up, who stays when things get hard, who holds your hand through the darkness. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is say no. No to manipulation. No to guilt trips. No to people who see you as a resource instead of a person. Until next time, remember, you don't owe anyone access to what you've earned through sacrifice. Not even family. Especially not family who only remembers you exist when they want something. Keep standing your ground, keep protecting your peace, and keep showing up for the people who actually deserve your care. They're out there, I promise. Sometimes you just have to clear out the users to make room for the real ones.